He was born of strong peasant stock, Francis and Margaret. The land did not produce enough to take care of the family, so Francis worked at other jobs to bring extra income into the house. While working for a landowner, he contracted pneumonia and died. John was barely 2 years old. Many wives and mothers would have fallen apart, but not Margaret Bosco. She took care of her bedridden mother-in-law, a stepson, and her own 2 children.
The children weren't spoiled. It would have been impossible. There was no place for frills in their lives. They all worked hard, they ate little, they put up with all the hardships imaginable, but they became strong physically and spiritually. John began working at 4 years old.
Don Bosco was gifted with many dreams, visions, and prophecies. He experienced his first dream at age 9. It impressed him so much that years later he could recount the dream exactly as it had happened. He was in a large playing field filled with children who were laughing and playing and cursing. Jesus appeared to him and told him he could stop these boys from cursing by loving them. Jesus told young John Our Lady would teach him what he must do in his life to make this happen. Mary appeared to him and spoke very gently to him. She affirmed what Jesus had told him. During the summertime, on Sunday afternoons when the children were all outdoors playing, John Bosco found another way to keep their attention, entertain them, and lead them in prayer. He set up a corner of the field near his home with a rope tied between 2 trees. He performed sleight of hand tricks. He juggled. He walked the tightrope. He did cartwheels. But he also led them in 5 decades of the Rosary and gave them a short talk, which he'd borrowed from the priest's homily at the Mass that morning. Children of all ages came to watch the show.
John's love for God and his church was well known throughout the entire area. He wanted very much to receive our Lord Jesus in the Eucharist, but the rule was no one could receive until he was at least 12 or 13 years old. An exception was made, however, for John. He received his first Holy Communion at age 10.
John's vocation was a foregone conclusion, but at age 11 he had never gone to school. He had a hunger to learn everything and anything that had to do with the church. He had a brilliant mind, a photographic memory, but there was nothing to challenge his intellect in his surroundings. The Lord sent an old priest, Don Colasso, to be his teacher and mentor. He went to Don Colasso to be taught, but also to get to know what a priest is like. This was the beginning of John Bosco's training, which would lead him to the seminary and ultimately to the priesthood. However, shortly after their lessons began, the priest died. Why did the Lord allow John so much conflict in his quest for the priesthood? He suffered every humiliation possible. He was much older than his classmates. They considered him a buffoon. He was a country hick. He dressed like a farmer. Even his instructors belittled him.
John Bosco learned and worked at more trades than a dozen men work in a lifetime. At any given time during his studies, he was a candy maker, shoemaker, restaurant manager, tailor, and of course, a clown, acrobat, and juggler. But a moment of truth was to come for John Bosco, a dead end. Now, whereas he was able to do these jobs, work at odd jobs, support himself, pay for his education, once he entered the seminary, it was impossible. He didn't know what to do.
He even considered the religious orders. They would pay for his seminary training. But this was not the Lord's plan. At the 11th hour, a young priest, Don Cafasso, who was to become very much a part of Don Bosco's life, advised John to wait until he could join the diocesan seminary. Once John said yes to that, money came from all quarters. Not a lot of money, just a little less than John needed to keep him on the edge. To make up the difference, he won partial scholarships, became a sacristan, which carried a salary with it, little things which put him over the top.
Towards the end of his seminary days, John Bosco had another dream. He was in a great valley back home in Becky. It turned into a large city, overflowing with young people, running, playing, shouting, cursing. He couldn't stand the sounds of their cursing. He went over to them to get them to stop. They wouldn't pay any attention to him. He began to shake some of them. They responded by hitting him. He hit them back. Then he retreated. They were too much for him. He could actually feel the pain of his bruises in his dream. A mysterious man stopped him. He ordered him to go back to them. A stranger pointed to a beautiful lady who was coming closer to John. "This is my mother. Listen to her. Her beauty mesmerized him." "If you wish to win over these boys," she told him, "do not hit them. Be kind and appeal to their better selves." He did as she told him. Another transformation took place. The children turned into wild animals, then into sheep and lambs.
John was anxious to get out of the seminary and begin working with the young people of Turin. He attempted a near impossible feat. At the end of his 3rd year of study, he asked the bishop permission to study his entire 4th year of theology over the summer vacation. He was given permission. He studied diligently the whole summer. When he returned in the autumn of 1840, he took a test on the entire 4th year of theology. He passed with flying colors and was advanced 1 full year to his 5th year.
Saturday, June the 5th, 1841, he was ordained a priest in the Cathedral of Turin. He was given the title for which he is famous, Don Bosco. Almost immediately after his ordination, he was besieged by offers to serve in various capacities all over the Diocese of Turin. He appealed to his spiritual director, Don Cofasso, for help. He told Don Bosco not to take any of the offers he had received, but to stay in Turin and continue with his theological studies.
At the time of Don Bosco's ordination, Italy was very anti-clerical. Don Cofasso encouraged his students to walk among the people, to become familiar with their living conditions. For Don Bosco, this was a revelation. He had no idea of the plight of the children until he began to walk the streets of Turin. It had become a hellhole, a giant ghetto for the working class. 2 and 3 families lived together in a single room under the most unsanitary conditions. He could walk anywhere in the slum section of the city and see the horrors of the young people who were left on their own.
His beginning came on the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, December the 8th. He was waiting to begin Mass when he saw a sacristan chasing a dirty young boy in rags out of the church. Don Bosco made him bring the boy back. He tried to put the nervous youth at his ease. He asked him, could he sing or whistle? The boy let out a big smile. Don Bosco had broken the ice. He began to teach this boy catechism. At the end of an hour, he asked if he would return the next week. The boy answered yes. Don Bosco told him not to come alone, to bring a friend. That was how it started. The next week he had 9, then 12. Pretty soon he was the Pied Piper of Turin. He had turned up, I think he had over 100 children coming to him every week.
Right.
Where was he going to put them? This became the battle cry for the rest of his life. He always had too little room and too little help.
Don Bosco brought these young people together each Sunday for Mass and Catechism. But in addition, there was fun, playing picnics, a version of the acrobat and juggling that the younger Don Bosco had been famous for. It was relationship. It was someone caring about these young people in a world where they were barely tolerated. Don Cofasso helped as long as he could. He allowed Don Bosco and his boys to use the courtyard of the Institute. But at the end of 3 years, Don Bosco had completed his studies at the Institute, and so he and his roving band had to leave. By now, he was up to 150.
Many people tried to help Don Bosco and his scamps by offering facilities for their meetings. However, after just one meeting, the group was usually asked to leave and never come back. Don Bosco tried everything. He gathered all of them together, then marched them out of the city to a place where they had been given permission to celebrate Mass. After Mass, they'd walk to a field where they could let loose. Then again, as a group, they came back to the church for benediction. Remember now, we're talking about 400 children processing.
Don Bosco was called a revolutionary. He was accused of preaching treason to his young people. Undercover police followed him on Sundays to the field, trying to catch the priest in revolutionary activities. They tried to be inconspicuous, but it was very obvious who they were. Don Bosco spoke softly during the sermons. The police had to draw closer to hear him. He wanted this. The sermons were meant for the police.
It was suggested to Don Bosco that he disband this group and send them to their local parishes for spiritual nourishment. But none of these children had a parish. They were street people. They'd never gone to church anywhere before Don Bosco picked them up out of the gutter. And if they did have any association with a church, there were no priests there who would reach out to them and love them.
In reflecting on this bleak time in his life, he wrote, "As I looked at the crowd of children and the thoughts of the rich harvest they promised my priesthood, I felt my heart was breaking. I was alone, without helpers. My health was shattered, and I could not tell where to gather my poor little lambs anymore."
He had rented a field where he could bring the boys on Sunday, but the local people complained so fiercely that the landlords broke the lease. They gave Don Bosco 2 weeks to find another place. It was impossible to find a place in 2 weeks. 1 week passed, nothing happened. 2 weeks passed, still nothing. On the last Sunday, Don Bosco brought the boys to the field. He had reached the end of his rope. As he walked among them during playtime, he prayed, "Oh my God, show me where I must gather them on Sunday, or tell me what I ought to do."
Don Bosco had no sooner made his prayer of petition than an elderly man came up to him on the field and offered him a site for the oratory. Don Bosco went with the man to look at it. What he saw was a beat-up barn, a hayloft. Not only was it not at all what he had envisioned for his oratory, but he had to bend down to get in the door. The roof was full of holes. When Don Bosco brought this to the man's attention, he was told it was no problem. They would fix it.
Don Bosco had been hurt a lot, having been thrown out of 5 locations in 10 months. He asked mildly if he could have a lease. The man replied, "You can have your lease and everything will be ready by Sunday." Praise you, Jesus. Don Bosco ran back to his boys, told them of the miracle that had happened, that they now had a permanent place and they could begin meeting there. They'd start the following Sunday. The cheers from the little people could be heard all over Turin. They all prayed a vigorous, super reverent rosary of thanksgiving to Our Lady that day. They knew she was the one who did it.
Don Bosco was physically and emotionally worn out. As soon as the question of a permanent oratory had been settled, his body shut down. He came down with a deadly case of pneumonia, the same illness that had killed his father. He was put into bed on the critical list. It got so bad he was given the last sacraments of the church.
He had taught his young people well. They went to the local churches and bombarded heaven with prayer. Deals were made. Promises of good behavior, weekly attendance at Mass, confessions, love of neighbor, whatever it would take to touch the heart of God. The battle cry that went up to heaven was, "Don't let Don Bosco die."
When it appeared that Don Bosco was at the end of his life, one of his friends, Father Burrell, who had stayed by his side throughout the illness, spoke softly to him. "John, these children need you. Ask God to let you stay. Please pray this prayer after me. Lord, if it be your good pleasure, cure me. I say this prayer in the name of my children." Don Bosco weakly whispered the prayer. The following morning, the fever broke, and he was back in business again.
Don Bosco had dreams on 3 different occasions in which he saw the house, the chapel, and the grounds of the oratory. This barn where they were meeting, the Pignati property, was definitely not it. So said Don Bosco, but not the Lord. Don Bosco complained of the house, which was only part of the property. It was inhabited by prostitutes. This was no example for his young people. The Lord made Don Bosco live in that house. But it was a scandal for a priest to live in a house with prostitutes. Don Bosco had to choose someone to live with him. The reputation had to be beyond question. Who could that have been? Margaret Bosco was the perfect choice. When Margaret and her son determined that this was the Lord's will, she moved without hesitation.
She embraced the 400, which soon became 500, and within a year the little oratory was bursting at the seams with 700 children. Although Don Bosco would not turn anyone away, it became obvious there was just no place to physically fit one more child. That's when they began to spread out. They rallied enough financial support to open not 1, but 2 new oratories in Turin.
A most important phase of Don Bosco's work began one rainy night when Margaret Bosco opened the door to find a soaking, half-starved orphan standing in front of her. Naturally, she let him stay there, and before very long, 1 multiplied into 10 and on and on. Don Bosco had to rent the entire house from Signor Pinati, which was not an easy feat, considering the prostitutes had set up a solid business in that locale. Eventually, Don Bosco bought the building, and the ladies had to leave.
Don Bosco always knew that he was called to begin his own order, but every time he tried to institute it, he was blocked. Now, 1852 was the worst possible time to begin a religious order. It was at the height of anti-clericalism and anti-Catholicism in Europe. The Jesuits had been thrown out of Piedmont. An order of nuns were also ejected. The Bishop of Turin was living in exile in Lyon, France. Even Rome was cutting back on religious orders.
For Don Bosco, it was the best possible time to begin a religious order. If it were successful, no credit would be given to him because it was an impossible task. He picked St. Francis de Sales to be his champion. Now, Don Bosco had always been a great admirer of St. Francis de Sales. His writings were brilliant. He was a workaholic who fought tirelessly against all the heresies of his day. But possibly the most attractive trait in St. Francis de Sales, which Don Bosco wanted his followers to possess, was his gentleness and understanding.
As word got out that Don Bosco intended to begin a religious order, many bets were taken as to how successful his venture would be. But he possessed one strong asset. His charism of taking care of the poor children and orphans without taxing the church or the state made him a very popular cause. The way Don Bosco got his support was hilarious. People in high places actually suggested that he begin an order. He knew he had the state behind him. His bishop was in his corner. All he needed was the Pope. So when the Lord gave him the sign, he went to Rome.
Father is sharing with us that Don Bosco came to Rome in his lifetime 20 different times. The first time he came, he was 43 years old in 1858 to ask permission of Pope Pius IX for the rule of the Salesians, which he did get. It took a while to get it done, but he did accomplish what he set out to do. This building, there was nothing here. He just came for a visit at that time.
We must share with you Il Grigio, the gray dog, whom we believe to have been Don Bosco's guardian angel. A lot of people didn't like Don Bosco. Attempts on his life became a commonplace event. Either dissident religious groups wanted to kill him or political groups. That's when he would find Il Grigio. No one ever knew where he came from or where he would go after the incidents.
The first instance took place in 1854 when Don Bosco was coming home late at night. He was in a very bad section of town. He saw two men in front of him walking slowly, keeping up with his pace. As he speeded up, they speeded up. If he slowed down, they did the same. He crossed to the other side of the street. When they did the same, he knew he was in trouble. He turned around to retreat, but they jumped him and threw a black cloak over his head. He tried to fight it, but it was no use. They were attempting to jam a cloth inside his mouth, when all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a huge, gray, hideous-looking dog charged out of the darkness and came charging at them. His growls sounded like those of a wolf or a bear. He lunged at Don Bosco's attackers. They were frightened right down to their toes. They ran for their life. Il Grigio didn't chase them. He stayed by Don Bosco's side.
From that time on, whenever Don Bosco came home late, after he passed the last of the buildings, Il Grigio would come out from out of nowhere to walk him home. Don Bosco never made a big deal about Il Grigio, who he was, where he came from, or why he stayed around for 30 years.
Who or what was Il Grigio? Many Salesians say they had seen him. His origins have never been officially investigated, but there are theories. In 1870, Don Bosco commented, "It sounds ridiculous to call him an angel, yet he is no ordinary dog. Our only comment is, why not an angel?"
Some of the incidents in Don Bosco's life make him appear like such a super saint that no one would believe he is real. If we don't mention them, we fail to give glory to God, who is the moving force behind all of it. Pope Leo XI said of him, "In Don Bosco's life, the supernatural almost becomes the natural and the extraordinary ordinary."
The Lord used dreams in Don Bosco's life to guide him, direct him, assure him, and affirm him. Pope Pius IX told him to write them down. When the Pope learned 9 years later that Don Bosco had not written them, he ordered him to do so. He said to him, "This task must have priority over everything else. Put aside the rest and take care of this." Most of Don Bosco's dreams had to do with his life, his mission, his boys, and his religious order. Our Lady was a part of most of his dreams. There is one dream of Don Bosco's that Penny and I use in all our talks. He shared this vision with his boys on May 30th, 1862.
He saw two huge columns on a storm-tossed sea. In between the two columns was a large ship, the ship of the church, with our vicar, the Pope, at the helm. All around the ship were smaller ships and boats, some friendly, some enemies, all geared up for battle. The Pope was trying to anchor the ship of the church in between the two great columns. The larger one was the Eucharist, the smaller, Our Lady, Help of Christians. A great battle went on through the night. The Pope was wounded. He got up again. He was killed. There was a shout of victory from the enemy ships, but that Pope was replaced by a new Pope. Finally, the Pope managed to anchor the ship of the church in between the Eucharist and Our Lady. The enemy ships were defeated. They were retreating as the friendly ships let out a shout of joy for their victory. A great calm covered the sea.
The dream about the two columns has struck us from the first time we read it as being more for today's church than for the time of Don Bosco. We think of this vision as a directive to follow the greatest strengths of our church, the body of Christ in the Eucharist, the Mother of Christ, Mary, through the Vicar of Christ, our Pope.
January the 31st, 1888, Don Bosco gave his spirit over to Jesus. In 1934, 46 years after his death, he was officially raised to the communion of saints.
Visions which Don Bosco had in 1870 are prophecies about major insurrection against the Pope and the Church in the period of 1870 to 1875, from within the Church and the state. But listen to them. Could they be for this time? Wars will come from the south, peace from the north. The laws of France no longer recognize the Creator. The Creator will reveal himself by visiting her 3 times with the scourge of his wrath. The first time he will destroy her pride by defeat, pillage, and destruction of crops, cattle, and men. On his second visit, the great whore of Babylon, which the faithful grievingly call Europe's brothel, shall lose her leader and fall prey to chaos. On my third visit, you shall fall under foreign yoke. From afar your enemies will see your palaces in flames, your homes in ruins, soaked in the blood of your heroes who are no more. But behold, a great warrior from the north appears, a banner in his right hand, his arm bearing the inscription, "Irresistible is the hand of the Lord." At that moment, the venerable old man from Rome went forward to meet him, wielding a flaming torch. The banner then grew larger and its blackness became white as snow. In its center stood out the name of the Almighty in golden letters. The warrior and his followers bowed profoundly to the venerable old man, the Pope, and joined hands with him.
Now the voice of heaven is addressed to the shepherd of shepherds, the Pope. You are in solemn conference with your co-workers, bishops and cardinals, but the enemy of good never stands idle. He cunningly plots and sets all his wiles against you. He will sow discord among your helpers and will rear enemies among my sons. The powers of the world shall vomit fire. They would love to smother my words in the throats of the guardians of my law, but they shall not succeed. They shall do much harm, but only to themselves. Hurry. If knots cannot be untied, sever them. Do not halt in the face of difficulties, but go forth until the hydra of error has been beheaded. At this blow, earth and hell shall tremble, but the world will be saved and the faithful shall exult. Gather around you only 2 co-workers, yet wherever you go, carry on the task entrusted to you and bring it to completion. Days go by swiftly, and your years are reaching their appointed number. But the great Queen shall always assist you, and as in the past, she will always be the powerful, prodigious defense of the Church.
But you, O Italy, land of blessings, who has plunged you into desolation?
not your enemies, but your own friends. Do you not hear your children begging for the bread of faith, unable to find one to break it for them? What shall I do? I shall strike the shepherds and scatter the sheep, so that those who sit upon the chair of Moses may seek better pastures, and their flock may gently listen and be fed. But my hand shall be heavy upon both flock and shepherds. Famine, plague, and war shall cause mothers to mourn the blood of their sons and husbands shed on foreign soil. What shall befall you, ungrateful, effeminate, proud Rome? You have reached a point when you seek and admire naught in your sovereign but luxury, forgetting that both your glory and his glory lies on Golgotha. Now he is old, the venerable old man of Rome, the Pope, frail, defenseless, and dispossessed. Nevertheless, though captive, his words cause the whole world to tremble. O Rome, 4 times shall I come to you. The first time I shall smite your regions and its people. The second time I shall bring slaughter and destruction to your very gates. Should that not make you open your eyes? A third time shall I come, and I will demolish your defenses and defenders. At my Father's command, terror, dismay, and desolation will reign.
My wise followers flee, but my law is still trod underfoot. Therefore I shall come a 4th time. Woe to you if my law again shall go unheeded. There shall be defections among both learned and ignorant. Your blood and that of your children shall wipe out your transgressions. And you, priests, why are you not prostrate between the vestibule and the altar, weeping and praying so the scourge may cease? Why do you not take up the shield of faith and preach my word from the rooftops, in the houses, streets, and squares, and even in inaccessible places? Do you not know that this is the terrible two-edged sword which smites my enemies and placates the wrath of God and man?
But the great Queen of heaven is at hand. The Lord's power is hers. Like mist she shall scatter her enemies. There shall yet come a violent hurricane. Iniquity is at an end. Sin shall cease. And before 2 full moons have shone in the month of flowers, the rainbow of peace shall appear on the earth. The great minister shall see the bride of his king clothed in glory. Write us at the address on our screen, or call us in the United States at 1-800-633-2484.
We love you.